This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the chairman of the State of Duma of the Russian Federation, Vyacheslav Viktorovich, has said that Algeria was a friendly country and a strategic partner after he was received by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has received the commander of the U.S. Africa Command AFRICOM, Lieutenant General Michael Langley, who is on a welcome visit to Algeria. An international seminar on the African dimension of the Algerian Revolution entitled Algeria and Africa, a shared memory of common fate and a promising future began today here in Algiers with the participation of several African delegations as well as Algerian and foreign experts. The representatives of the Palestinian factions have agreed on a unified position within the Palestinian Liberation Organization to face up to Israel's aggression and put an end to division. Hello and welcome again, I'm Jamal Samani. The chairman of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, Vyacheslav Viktorovich Volodin, who ended his visit to Algeria, has said that Algeria was a friendly country and a strategic partner who is committed to raising relations between the two countries to higher levels. Following a meeting granted to him by the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, Mr. Vyacheslav said that his important and fruitful meeting with the President of the Republic had enabled him to discuss several topics aimed at developing relations which date back to the time of the Soviet Union.
We discussed a number of issues relating to bilateral relations and ways and means of developing them further. As you know, our diplomatic relations date back to the days of the Soviet Union, and our relations have continued to strengthen and develop ever since. We share the same views on a number of regional and international issues. Algeria is a friendly country and a strategic partner for us, and our parliamentary relations reflect these strong and solid ties. Our meeting with the President of the Republic was fruitful.
The Russian official has stressed the importance of developing parliamentary relations between Algeria and Russia in the framework of the Declaration on a Deep Strategic Partnership signed last year in Moscow by Presidents Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Vladimir Putin.
We are here in Algeria, the invitation of the Algerian National People's Assembly to work on developing parliamentary relations with the Duma of the Russian Federation, taking into account the strategic partnership agreement signed jointly by President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and President Vladimir Putin. We are doing our utmost to implement this agreement in accordance with the legal framework. The development of parliamentary relations will undoubtedly contribute to the development of political relations, and it should be recalled that trade has grown significantly, even doubling over the previous year to reach $3.7 billion. We have agreed to set up a high-level joint committee between the two parliamentary institutions to examine all the concerns of both parties, and this was made possible thanks to the historic visit made by the President of the Republic to the Russian Federation last year.
The meeting was attended by the President of the National People's Assembly, Mr. Brahim Boughali, and the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Lounas Megramen. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has received the commander of the U.S. Africa Command AFRICOM, Lieutenant General Michael Langley, who is on a welcome visit to Algeria. Earlier, the commander of the U.S. Africa Command was received by Army General Saeed Shingriha, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army. During the meeting, the two sides discussed the security challenges facing the African continent and exchanged views on issues of common concern, as well as ways and means to strengthen military cooperation between the two countries. The Army General affirmed that Algeria is pursuing her efforts to consolidate common African action against terrorism and its prevention, recalling that Algeria took several initiatives to strengthen joint security cooperation mechanisms. He also reiterated Algeria's commitment to support all African initiatives and support the efforts of AU bodies to enable the African continent to meet the challenges it faces. The commander of the U.S. Africa Command, for its part, expressed satisfaction at his visit to Algeria, which allowed him to discuss with the High Command of the National People's Army the various security issues on the regional and international scene. Now, more news for today with Majid Mila.
Hi, Jamal. Thanks. Indeed, an international seminar on the African dimension of the Algerian Revolution entitled Algeria and Africa, a shared memory, a common fate and a promising future began today here in Algiers with the participation of several African delegations as well as Algeria and foreign experts. The two-day event kicked off under the chairmanship of the Minister of War, Veterans and Right Holders, Mr. Laïd Rubiga, in the presence of members of the government, members of the diplomatic corps accredited in Algeria and representatives of national organizations. Organized by the Ministry of War Veterans in coordination with the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the Association of the International Friends of the Algerian Revolution, the seminar aims to highlight the African dimension of the Algerian Revolution. The international seminar will also recall that Algeria has been and remains the Mecca of revolutionary on the African and global scale, constantly committed to achieving the objectives of African integration by drawing on shared memory to pursue the process of building and developing a better future for Africa. The event will also evoke the shared African memory, highlighting the historical relations between Algeria and Africa with the aim of demonstrating that the continent is the ideal place to exercise diplomacy and foreign action. The seminar agenda will include a number of presentations, the main themes of which will be common links in the process of building Africa, partnership opportunities and initiatives for building sustainable development, and Algeria a model for meeting African aspirations. Back to you, Jamal.
Here in Algiers, the Interior Minister, Mr. Brahim Merad, has called on members of the security forces to deploy all means to ensure optimum security of the presidential elections scheduled for the 7th of September in order to enable the citizens to exercise their constitutional right in an atmosphere of peace and security. Mariam Barshi.
Mr. Merad presided over a ceremony to celebrate the 62nd anniversary of the creation of the Algerian police, in which he had the following to say.
We are proud of the results we have achieved, which have been recognized at regional and international level and have inspired many countries. We are on the eve of an important electoral event, and I therefore invite you to ensure security ahead of the presidential elections.
Mr. Merad also said that the celebration was an opportunity to assess the significant progress made by the security forces in terms of personnel, equipment, and working methods based on professionalism, modernization and efficiency, adding that the progress has been achieved thanks to investment in human resources and good training. Mr. Merad also recalled the achievements made by the Algerian police over the past few years in terms of supporting the dynamic development that our country has undergone, highlighting the interest granted by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, in ensuring the safety and security of citizens.
The Higher Council for Youth has organized here in Algiers the Youth Diplomacy Forum with the aim of strengthening dialogue between young people and diplomats and recalling Algeria's constant stance in favor of just causes around the world. Under the theme Promising Diplomacy for a Pioneer in Algeria, the three-day forum aims to present through panels the experiences, proposals and role of young people in the field of youth diplomacy in international forums. In a speech delivered by the President of the Higher Council for Youth, Mr. Mustafa Hidawi, he stressed that youth diplomacy embodies one of the Council's objectives, which is to strengthen our cooperation between young people at international level and to highlight the role of young Algerians in international forums. Now, the Sonatrach Hydrocarbon Group announced that the parties involved in the project to transport green hydrogen produced in Algeria to Europe, namely South 2 Corridor, have agreed to sign a Memorandum of Understanding in September 2024 to jointly carry out feasibility studies for the implementation of this integrated project along the entire hydrogen value chain. Mariam Barshi again.
The group also pointed out that the South's H2 corridor, one of the European Union's biggest sources of green hydrogen, aims to transport 4 million tons of green hydrogen per year from Algeria to Germany via Italy and Austria using existing infrastructure reallocated to transport hydrogen or new dedicated infrastructures. Meanwhile, Sonatrach launched new series of measures and projects, including the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, increasing the level of integrations of renewable energies, and developing natural and technological carbon sequestration solutions. The new strategic document was signed at the group's head office by its CEO, Mr. Rashid Hashishi, in the presence of the Ministers of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, and of the Environment and Renewable Energies, Mrs. Faizia Dahleb. Speaking to newsmen about the group's strategy, Mr. Hashishi had this to say.
Sonatrach's strategy is based on three main pillars: investment and consolidation of capacities, as well as technology transfer, gradual integration of clean energies into the energy mix, and development of new segments. This strategy aims to improve the energy efficiency of infrastructure and revitalize the research and renovation sector.
For the Minister of Energy, this strategy will bring greater clarity to the various steps taken over the years by Sonatrach to combat climate change. On the occasion, Mr. Arkab recalled the Sonatrach Hydrocarbon Group's participation in numerous global initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as its cooperation with the World Bank to improve measurement techniques and reduce emissions generated by oil and gas activities.
Now to the Middle East. The representatives of the Palestinian factions have agreed on a unifying position within the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, to face up to Israel's aggression and put an end to divisions. The agreement was reached in Pekin at the end of a series of discussions and dialogue initiated by China. The Palestinian factions hailed the ruling of the International Court of Justice, which confirmed the illegality of Israel's occupation and settlements on the land of the State of Palestine and the necessity to removing them as soon as possible. They affirmed their commitment to the establishment of the Palestinian state with Occupy Jerusalem as its capital in accordance with the relevant UN resolutions. The representative of the Palestinian Hamas movement, Youssef Hamdan, here in Algiers, had more about the agreement.
The
Declaration of Pekin was launched in the wake of the Algiers Declaration and its outcome, as well as the National Reconciliation Agreement signed in Cairo. The declaration is designed to reject all attempts to impose a political will to the Palestinian people. The document refers to the movement's position on the post-war in Gaza, and that the issue is a Palestinian issue, and that the movement should not govern alone in Gaza. We are still facing many challenges, notably the implementation of the agreement reached between the various factions. Our experience in Algiers and in other capitals highlighted that the United States administration and the occupier are interfering to make all agreements fail. The reason why the document insists on the necessity to get rid of the United States hegemony.
Earlier, the Palestinian ambassador here addressed the Palestinian issue and the sufferings of the Palestinian people, which he reiterated is more than ever determined to fight until it recovers its rights.
I'm fully aware of Algeria's major role in supporting all Africans, revolutions and all peoples of Africa, but we, the Palestinian people, we record with respect and consideration the historic support provided to the Palestinian people to help it overcome these difficult days. I swear on behalf of the Palestinian people that we will continue to fight to stick to our land, to occupy Jerusalem until we achieve victory, the fulfillment of self-determination and the creation of an independent Palestinian state.
Now, in other news, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign raised $81 million in the first 24 hours of her candidacy, considered as a new presidential donation record following President Biden's departure from the race. Harris' stunning influx of funds injects new energy into the race after Democrats saw Biden's path to victory rapidly shrink. Now it's time for you, Majid.
Back to Algiers, the grandson of the late South African leader Nelson Mandela, Zweli Mandela, has reiterated his country's position in favor of the Palestinian and Sahrawi causes. More details with my colleague Assia Bikar.
During his visit to the headquarters of the International Association of Friends of the Algerian Revolution here in Algiers on the eve of an international conference entitled Algeria and Africa, A Common Memory, Shared Destiny and a Promising Future, the South African MP recalled the journey of his late grandfather against apartheid and the special relations he had with Algeria.
Algeria has always been our second home. This is a land and a country and a people that my grandfather first engaged and met with in 1962, forging a lifetime relationship with the Algerian people. He has always declared that Algeria made him a man, because it was here in Algeria, while we were fighting our struggle for liberation in South Africa, having faced 350 years of colonialism, coupled with a brutal apartheid regime, my grandfather and the leadership of the African National Congress came to a conclusion that as South Africans, we were left with two options: to resist or submit.
He added that Algeria and South Africa currently work together at the diplomatic level to defend the rights of the oppressed around the world, notably the Palestinian and Sahrawi peoples.
We have to ensure that we picked up the baton where these heroes of our struggle for liberation left off, and ensure that as the next generation, we continue to grow the ties between Algeria and South Africa, in being the voice for oppressed nations around the world. South Africa continues to enjoy diplomatic relations with Algeria, and we coordinate our efforts in the African Union as well as in the United Nations. And we hope to continue to solidify these relationships in ensuring that we can better serve humanity. My grandfather's name, Madiba, has always been associated with the most vulnerable and the most marginalized around the world. And therefore, we will continue to ensure that we lend support to all that are oppressed around the globe, particularly our brothers and sisters in Western Sahara and in Palestine. As you can see, wherever I go, I carry Western Sahara with me and Palestine. The revolution must live on and must continue.
As for South Africa's case against the Israeli occupation at the International Court of Justice, Mandela's grandson said South Africa's history against oppression makes her pioneer in advocating the rights of Palestinians.
In 1995, when he visited Gaza, he made a commitment to the Palestinians by saying that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Since his passing, many of us in this generation in South Africa have picked up the baton where he left off, and we are that generation that has committed itself in fulfilling Madiba's dream in liberating Palestine in our lifetime. This is why you see many of us in South Africa continuing to exert pressure on our government as civil rights activists and grassroots organizations that they must be the voice of the oppressed, most vulnerable, and the most marginalized in the international community. So we applaud, therefore, the work that is being done by our South African government as led by His Excellency President Ramaphosa, as well as our minister, the former minister Naledi Pandor, and the current minister Ronald Lamola. We cannot be silent in the full view of a genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity that are being perpetuated against Palestinians for the past 76 years by a brutal apartheid state of Israel. So you and I, all of us as a collective, must find means and ways on a daily basis on how we can isolate the Zionist usurping entity and show it to be the pariah state of the world.
The importance of preventing the oppressing entities from participating in sport events was highlighted by the South African official who shed light on his association's activities against the participation of the Israeli occupation in the Olympic Games.
Before coming to Algeria, I went to Switzerland. I was in Lausanne at the headquarters of the International Olympic Committee, calling on them to ban the Zionist usurping entity from participating in the Paris Olympic Games. I also organized major protests and marches in Paris on Saturday. I was part of those marches and protests, calling on the Europeans, and particularly the Euro-Palestine organization, to continue right up until opening day of the Olympics, staging protests and marches to call for the ban, to have the Zionist usurping entity banned from the Olympics.
He pointed out that the double standard and silence of the world power in the face of the Israeli crimes is not a new phenomenon, but a stumbling block that all fighters of justice should go through and overcome.
You will recall that was the same experience we underwent, that governments such as the United Kingdom in the leadership of Margaret Thatcher, the United States of America in the leadership of Ronald Reagan, and the Zionist usurping entity have always supported the apartheid regime in South Africa. But that didn't deter us from waging our struggle. We had to look at the strategy and tactics in a holistic view from what we had learned out of the Algerian Revolution. In this regard, whilst our comrades and brothers and sisters were waging an armed struggle outside our borders, because it is enshrined in international law that you can be able to defend yourself against occupation and secular colonialists.
Let's note that upon the arrival of Nelson Mandela's grandson, Zwelivelele Mandela, to the headquarters of the International Friends of the Algerian Revolution, he planted a tree in memory of Nelson Mandela and his fight against apartheid.
You are still listening to Radio Algeria International. The 6th National Festival of Algerian Traditional Dresses has kicked off at the Center for Arts and Culture of the Rice Palace, or Bastion 23, in Algiers, with a participation around 15 designers. In this line, I invite you to listen to this program dedicated to the Algerian traditional costume, karakou.
And welcome to Discover Algeria, a weekly program in which we'll let you discover or know more about the Algerian heritage, to include history, traditions, popular beliefs, social rituals, celebrations, as well as many aspects of the Algerian life dating back to the Berber or Amazigh era until the Muslims one. I have so far in this program never talked about the Algerian clothing and costumes, although I evoked in previous programs the various styles of jewels known here in Algeria. So today I'll talk about a female costume, and actually a top called karakou, and worn initially in Algiers, but nowadays women across Algeria wear, as on very special occasion, this beautiful garment. So, what is the karakou and what is it made of?
أشارت بطرف العين أشارت بطرف العين خيفة أهلها
It's been said that the karakou already existed here in Algiers in the 15th century. The kerekou is a clothing that expresses the sublime refinement of Algiers society. It is actually a vest embroidered with real gold-made threads in different ways and worn with a sarwel, a kind of pants, either shilqa, which is the Algerian for straight one, or mdouar, which is another kind of sarwel that is rounded, as the Algerian word says, with a much bigger amount of fabric in it. The fabric that makes the kerekou special is velvet, most of the time of black color, as it enhances the beauty of golden embroidery. At that time, women wore what is called the gnidra, which is the Algerian word for blouse, made loose and in white linen with a sarwel that goes down to the ankles. On the top of this blouse, women wore the ghlila, a long satin or velvet jacket that falls to knee elbow with sleeves. It is decorated with either golden or silver buttons. In addition to al-gnidra, women wore a loose white linen trousers down to their ankles, as I told you earlier, upon which fell the ghlila. The Algiers women wore these velvet slippers with all these beautifully garments, and these slippers were richly embroidered too with golden threads. At that time, only wealthy women wore kerekou made up of very expensive fabrics embroidered in real golden or silver threads in either majboud technique, which is a kind of plain embroidery, or the fitla, which is a kind of 3D way of embroidering. Early this century, the ghlila jabadouli, as it was called at that time, abandoned decorations of triangular and ovoid shapes, as they were too expensive and difficult to acquire, notably after the extinction of this handicraft here in Algiers. The neckline decorated with trimming also disappeared, and the embroidered sleeves that distinguished the ghlila jabadouli remained unchanged for quite a long time. Nowadays, this garment has changed, and it is waisted and has a neckline. It also became called kerekou and had the status of ceremonial costume. This garment remained faithful to the original lines, geometric patterns and representations of plants like roses and even some birds such as peacocks. The kerekou, which looked much more like a jacket in the 1930s, combines a bust whose cup is inspired from European male jackets. There was even an emergence of a short and straight model requiring less velvet. Sometimes even sleeveless bolero replaces the camisole. Between the 19th and mid-20th century,